Imagine waking up and realizing that one of the most popular platforms on Earth, the digital space where millions found not just entertainment, but a voice, had been outlawed overnight. Streets in major cities were suddenly flooded with people. Not just teenagers, not just influencers, but teachers, veterans, parents, all screaming one thing: that something sacred had just been ripped away. Not because of war, not because of a terrorist threat, but because a courtroom said an app was too dangerous to exist. That's how it started. No gunshots, no soldiers, just a ruling and silence. And then the roar. The terrifying thing isn't that TikTok was banned. The terrifying thing is why. Why now? Why this way? And why no one was ready? Governments don't censor platforms for fun. They do it when the cost of letting people speak freely outweighs the risk of controlling them. Officially, the argument was about national security, data harvesting, Chinese influence. But unofficially, people are whispering something else. That this wasn't about China, it was about control. The kind of control that only becomes visible when it's already too late. Rumors began circulating in encrypted forums. Allegedly, private analytics showed that TikTok had become a breeding ground for political dissent. Not memes, not dance videos, but organized resistance. Entire protest movements were incubating on the platform. Some believe intelligence agencies were alarmed not by Beijing's reach, but by the American youth's growing resistance to domestic narratives. The kind of resistance that can't be policed in traditional ways. One leaked document, reportedly from a Department of Defense advisory board, outlined strategies to digitally diffuse civil unrest through social media restructuring. It didn't mention TikTok by name, but the timing was eerie. The ban was signed just days later. Then came the protests, organized, fast, massive. But what came next was even more disturbing. Internet throttling in some areas, VPN crackdowns, influencers receiving cease and desist letters for posting about the protests, financial accounts of organizers mysteriously frozen, and then silence again. The kind of silence that only comes after a purge. Entire digital footprints vanished overnight. Accounts deleted, hashtags buried, videos demonetized. As if reality itself was being redrawn by invisible hands. Free speech advocates screamed. Digital rights organizations filed emergency appeals. But none of it mattered. The narrative had already shifted. News anchors repeated the same script. Foreign interference, safety of the children, threats to national unity. And slowly, what was once an outcry became a cautionary tale. People stopped posting. Fear replaced fury. And a platform that once pulsed with chaotic, uncontrolled energy was now just an empty icon on banned app lists. The message was clear. Speak too loudly, and the plug gets pulled. The chilling effect rippled far beyond TikTok. Creators on other platforms began self-censoring. Editors revised headlines. Comment sections were disabled. The digital air grew thinner. But why TikTok? Why now? Some experts say it was a perfect storm, a platform with an unpredictable algorithm, one that didn't promote establishment content the way others did, one that allowed unknowns to become viral, and perhaps most dangerously, one that allowed young people to discover their own power. That kind of digital environment is anathema to centralized control, especially when that power begins to organize itself. Especially when that organization has no leader, no headquarters, and no off switch. The fear wasn't the content, it was the connections, the speed, the spontaneity. A system where influence wasn't bought or managed. It was organic, raw, and impossible to predict. There are whispers, unconfirmed but persistent, that internal memos from telecom providers included phrases like, Preemptive mitigation of digital contagion. Think about that. A protest, a meme, a single viral clip labeled as a contagion. Something to be isolated, quarantined, deleted. We used to worry about viruses and code. Now, they worry about ideas. And the response to those ideas is no longer to argue, but to erase. And with erasure comes reprogramming, new feeds, new influencers, new narratives dressed in familiar formats. The cage rebuilt, but padded. And outside that cage, the algorithms tighten. Financial analysts noticed something odd too. Around the same time as the ban, major tech stocks surged, but only for platforms with more government-aligned moderation policies. Coincidence? Or a quiet reward system? Some say private meetings were held between key officials and executives from rival platforms. Agreements were allegedly made, preferential treatment promised, in exchange for something simple: predictability. A content ecosystem that wouldn't shake the pillars of consensus too violently. Where content flowed, but only in sanctioned directions. Where virality was a button, not a phenomenon. This isn't just about one app. It's about the infrastructure of permission, about the line between a platform and a propaganda tool, and what happens when governments decide they no longer want to tolerate the messiness of free expression. What's even more unsettling is how easily the public adjusted. Within weeks, alternatives rose. Short video clones with tighter algorithms and cleaner interfaces, promoted as safer, more family-friendly, but also more compliant. Sanitized filters on reality, creating the illusion of diversity while feeding the same script in different voices. It wasn't censorship, they said. It was optimization. One former intelligence analyst said, anonymously, that removing TikTok was a test balloon if people didn't revolt. Not just online, but in the streets. The door would be open for more bans, more restrictions, more silence. Because silence doesn't make headlines. Silence doesn't spread. It just settles in. And one day, you look around and realize that your entire digital landscape has been edited, sanitized, approved, and no one remembers when it changed. Like boiling water with the flame on low. By the time it hurts, it's already too late. Ask yourself, when was the last time you saw something online that truly shocked you? Not in a disturbing way, but in a liberating one. A truth so raw it made you uncomfortable. If you can't remember, that's not your fault. That's by design. Algorithms that used to amplify the strange and powerful are now tuned to suppress the volatile. And the most volatile force in any society is a thinking, questioning citizen. One that refuses the pre-approved version of events. One that asks, again and again, what's being hidden and why. One that sees silence as a clue, not a comfort. Parents were told the ban was for the safety of their children. But were their children ever in danger from the app itself? Or were they in danger of asking the wrong questions, of learning too much, of connecting with others who felt the same confusion, the same betrayal, the same rage? Rage is dangerous, not because it breaks things, but because it builds momentum. And when that momentum becomes collective, it becomes political. And when it becomes political, it threatens systems that rely on obedience. Some educators claimed, quietly, that TikTok became a hub for uncensored discussions about history, economics, and social power. That students were sharing banned books, dissecting propaganda, decoding legislation. That they were doing what schools no longer dared to do. And that terrified the system. Because information isn't power. Shared information is. And when information spreads outside sanctioned channels, it becomes insurgent. It becomes dangerous, especially when it finds fertile ground in a generation raised on contradiction and contradiction alone. And when the sharing stops, when the plugs are pulled, that power dissolves. One protester, arrested during the first week of the ban, reportedly told officers, "This isn't about TikTok, it's about the right to feel alive." Let that sink in. To feel alive. Not entertained, not distracted, but awake, aware, angry, free. That's the state they fear most. A population not just informed, but alert. A society that refuses the sleepwalking rhythm of curated distraction. So maybe that's the real danger. Not foreign influence, not viral dances, but a generation waking up, seeing the strings, and reaching to cut them. A generation that refuses to be told what matters, that insists on finding out for itself, and that refuses to forget. Because remembering is the seed of resistance, and forgetting is the first act of surrender. The ban may have started with a courtroom ruling, but its echoes are cultural, psychological, generational. What else will vanish in the name of security? What other freedoms will be rebranded as threats? And when the last app is banned, when the last protest is filtered out, when the last voice is silenced, who will remember what it felt like to be unafraid? Because fear is contagious, but so is courage. And maybe, just maybe, that's what they fear most. Not the noise, but the awakening it signals. Not the app, but the fire it lit.